And if you watched us yesterday, it's a huge turnaround from where we were just 24 hours ago.
It's kind of fascinating, right? So here we have green across the screen. NASDAQ really an outperformer, up 1.5%. But if you look at like the S&P 500, despite being up on the index level, you look into the index and you've got most names in the S&P 500 lower, which is opposite of what we had yesterday. A lot of selling, yet most names were higher. So you make sense of this market trade.
I'm not going to make sense of the trade. What I'm going to do is tell you that even though NVIDIA's up, close to 8% today, still got a long way to go to get back to where it was at the end of the day on Friday. About 13% still from there.
Ben Emmons this morning saying it was a golden buying opportunity. I guess that's true, at least for today, but we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, right? And I would also point out that this whole reversal didn't extend to the Treasury trade, so that flight to quality that we saw yesterday, that didn't get reversed.
We had a lot of guests on this program and, of course, on yours as well, who were basically saying, look, this is an opportunity to buy stocks on sale, high valuation stocks. I guess the question, though, is this going to come back and haunt them?
Yeah, and the earnings throughout the week tomorrow and throughout that AI trade, we're going to get some clarity on that and get some questions answered on that.
And we're expecting some earnings after the bell today out of Qorvo, Packaging Corp, Starbucks, and Chubb, just to name a few, as we get the closing bells in New York. Something to cheer about on the day, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up more than 100 points, or about 0.3%. The S&P gaining about 0.9% on the day. That's a gain of more than 50 points, right back to that 6,067 level as we wait for these numbers to settle out. The NASDAQ composite looks like it's going to close higher by about 390 points, or 2% on the day. The NASDAQ 100 up more than 300 points as well, or about 1.6% on the day. But I think Carol was kind of getting at when you talk about the overwhelming number of stocks in the S&P were down, and you see that reflected in the Russell 2000, in the S&P 400 mid-caps, and in Dow Transports. The Russell only higher by 0.2%, mid-caps only up 0.1%, Dow Transports lower on the day by 0.9%.
Yeah, exactly. And we do have some earnings crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Let me bring it up for you. Qorvo crossing, and let's get right to the outlook.
Looking good.
Yeah, sees fourth quarter adjusted EPS 90 cents to $1.10 a share, way above the street estimate of 88 cents a share. Go back to the third quarter, adjusted EPS of $1.61. Folks, that is a big beat. $1.22 was what the street was expecting. And you can see investors, yep, pretty happy. Certainly if you're a bull on that name, stock's up 12% in the aftermarket. The
company's president and CEO said, quote, Qorvo is executing on a broad set of strategic initiatives to expand margin, generate strong free cash flow, and increase shareholder value. Saying that, this is Bob Brugaworth, saying that during the December quarter, the company continued to successfully support our largest customer, who represented approximately 50% of sales.
Who is that customer? Apple.
Yes.
Well, listen to this, though. Within our Android 5G product portfolio, they're narrowing their focus to the higher value flagship and premium tiers.
Well, you know, Samsung also a client, but one investor that's really important for Qorvo, of course, Starboard, building a 7.7% stake most recently in Qorvo, according to the Wall Street Journal just a little while back. They'll want to see some results, and obviously Qorvo is really putting everything into this earnings season.
And it kind of makes you wonder what the setup is for Apple, at least according to the Bloomberg terminal. About 46% of the revenue coming from the company. And remember, Apple was a stock that was really taking it on the chin prior to this week because everyone was concerned about a potential slump in iPhone unit sales.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the, as we await more earnings, some of the individual gainers. NVIDIA on that list, a top gainer in the NASDAQ 100, guys, after one day after, seeing that massive rout in its share price and market cap, of course, a record decline by any company in market history. But today, NVIDIA snapping back up almost 9% in today's session. So you saw investors coming back in and doing some buying. Royal Caribbean, also an outperformer, up about 12% at the close, bringing the whole cruise industry higher and among your top gainers in the S&P 500. We did see Royal Caribbean hitting a record today, up the most in more than 2 years. It is the top gainer, as I said, in the S&P. This is after it reported a full-year profit forecast that blew past expectations. Cruise demand continuing to ramp up. We talked with the company's CEO, really outperformance in terms of demand and also excursions, and also now they're moving into river cruises. So they were very, very upbeat about the outlook. They talked about also customers' balance sheets being really good. And so one reason for why demand continues in the cruise industry. CrowdStrike, had to mention, top performer in both the NASDAQ 100 and the S&P 500. Shares, that software area continuing to outperform in the market trade. You had a bunch of analysts talking about B of A, writing that having improved capabilities at lower cost. We're talking about the news that we got yesterday from DeepSeek that essentially, if it's less expensive, that you could see a ramp up in terms of these software companies, their services, and more companies tapping into it when they want to do kind of AI capabilities. So CrowdStrike really an outperformer in today's session.
All right, some of the underperformers. I do want to start with JetBlue. Shares finished the day down 25%. It plummeted the most ever as the company forecast weaker than expected revenue and higher costs for the company for the coming year, 25.7% to the downside. Earlier in the session, it was down as much as 29%. Some of the reasons include rising compensation and aircraft maintenance expenses, grounded planes due to an engine manufacturing defect. We talked to George Ferguson a little earlier in our program, who mentioned that JetBlue kind of lives in this area where not a lot of other companies live. It's not an ultra low-cost carrier like a Spirit or Frontier, and it's not necessarily a premium carrier like the big three. And that makes it difficult in terms of pricing and also difficult in terms of marketing. GM shares falling today, finishing the day lower after the company reported a better than expected profit outlook, with adjusted earnings expected to range from $13.7 billion to $15.7 billion this year. Look at that, shares down more than 8%. The forecast does not account for potential 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which could impact GM's supply chain and profitability. Also important to note that part of the improved outlook, it's largely due to the decision to shutter Cruise, which is the self-driving car unit, expected to save around $500 million this year.
Starbucks results are crossing the wire right now. The company is saying that its North American comp sales were down about 4%. That was the expectation. In fact, the expectation was for a drop of 5%, so better than expected drop for North American comp sales. Total comp sales in the fiscal fourth quarter also down about 4%. The street was looking for 5.3. The company also saying here that when it comes to operating margin, that came in a little bit narrower than what the street was expecting, about 12%. The street was looking for 13%, though. On the plus side, average ticket sales, ticket prices, I should say, so basically the amount of money that you spend every time you go there, up 3%. The street was looking for a gain of about 1.9% here. So I guess somewhat of a slightly better start here for Brian Niccol, as this represents that fourth quarter, his first full quarter there at the helm as CEO.
Yeah, and the stock is up about 4% in the aftermarket. Here's some commentary from Brian Niccol, who was, took over last fall. While we're only one quarter into our turnaround, we're moving quickly to act on the Back to Starbucks efforts, and we've seen a positive response. Although we're in the beginning chapter and have much more work ahead of us, we will continue to prioritize shareholder value through dividends, providing a predictable return of capital while we turn around our business. So, yeah, investors, at least so far, guys, like what they see and are hearing from the company. Again, up about 3.9% in the aftermarket.
And that net revenue figure beating as well, Carol, $9.4 billion. The estimate was for $9.31 billion. We'll see if investors give Brian Niccol a little more time. Interesting, too, Tim, to see that China comp sales were much better than the bad number that was anticipated. So analysts were looking for China's comp sales to be down more than 9%. They were, in fact, only down 6%.
I'm wondering how much you can read into these results, given that it has only been one quarter, and a lot of the changes that the company has implemented did not even happen until this week. I mean, we're talking about redesigns to make the stores sort of go back to their roots. The baristas using Sharpies rather than like a printed out receipt. Doing, I think it was 7 lines of caramel on top of those caramel lattes, like but those little details that
but those
supposedly
details
will make a
matter.
difference.
And I remember when he got hired, I mean, he talked a lot about how he spent when he was trying to decide whether to take the job. He was talking about how he just basically went all up and down California where he lives and went into Starbucks and just kind of took note of what he didn't like. And he just said it wasn't an inviting experience, and he wanted to bring that back. And I know some of us who remember kind of Starbucks back in the days, it was a place where you just went and hung out. And now, at least the ones around us here near Bloomberg World Headquarters, it's basically just grab your coffee and get the heck out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But you think about a specialty in terms of how he kind of turned around Chipotle and thought about the dining experience there and those things. So it looks like at least initially investors like what he's doing, and we will see. And we'll look forward to what we get on the call a little bit later on. All right, guys, Starbucks, as we saw, up about 3-4% here in the aftermarket. That's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage of the close, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We call it the closing bell. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.